I can get back to the point of discussion that I wanted to raise before.
Is there a distinction between knowledge and...
I referred to my answer before. I said yes. No.
Yes, there's... Okay, excellent.
Hold on. I now get to respond. Now, in this... Sorry.
I haven't asked you a question yet. I haven't asked you...
You just asked me.
No, I haven't asked you a question yet.
Is that a question?
I haven't asked you a question yet.
Yes, you did.
No, I want to... No, but I was preambling.
Knowledge and power.
Is that a question, yes or no?
Yeah, I'm preambling. Now, with God, is there a distinction between knowledge and power or not?
I wanted to touch
with God, is there a distinction between knowledge and power or not?
On the point.
With God, is there a distinction between knowledge and power or not?
There's something that needs to be touched on.
With God, is there a distinction between knowledge and power or not?
There's a reason why it needs to be touched on.
With God, is there a distinction between knowledge and power or not?
I'm just going to continue. Because you said...
Is there a distinction?
Hold on. So you said...
You don't know?
I know, just want to...
No, can you explain? Because you were being very smart before. Is there a distinction God? Is there a distinction between God and power?
He just wants to drive a script.
Knowledge and power, is there a distinction or not?
Why are you running?
I'm not. I'm asking a question. How am I running? I'm asking a question. How come you can't answer that? Is there a distinction? Is there a distinction?
You got folded up.
No. Is there a question? Is there a distinction between knowledge and power?
I'm just going to continue. So
is there a distinction or not?
Classically, is going to be an Aristotelian notion. Now,
which one?
Aristotelian. So it's going to be hylomorphic, right?
I'm asking a question. Is there a distinction between knowledge and power or not?
I already said that. On
yes
the
or no?
part of a man, yes, because
on the part of God.
On the part of God?
Yes.
Yeah, on the part of God.
Aha.
Within God, there's not going to be a distinction.
Aha.
Now, again, the reason why, because composition is going to be an issue.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, excellent.
Yeah, no.
So God doesn't know.
I'm going to finish
God doesn't know things. God is ignorant.
I'm just going to finish my question.
God is ignorant.
No.
Your God is ignorant.
My definition. Yeah, thank you. Right?
Is God knowledgeable or not knowledgeable?
Now, the reason is because he actually has
a compositional
view of knowledge. Now, again,
is God knowledgeable or not?
Your Muslim brother is telling you to let me finish.
No, is God knowledgeable or not?
Let me complete.
Is God knowledgeable or not? Is God knowledgeable or not?
Let me finish.
The fact that you can't let him talk is low.
No.
Is God knowledgeable or not?
Doesn't
matter. Is God knowledgeable or not? Is
power
knowledgeable? Is God powerful or not?
Hold on.
Is God powerful or not?
Answer these questions. It's fine.
Is God powerful or not?
As I was explaining before,
is God powerful or not?
I think everyone else wants to actually hear the answer that I have.
Go ahead.
The idea of power is going to be the ability to actualize potencies. This is the classical definition, not what you said.
Okay.
Now, the definition of knowledge is going to be the ability to possess a form without becoming the form itself.
Yeah.
This is a Thomistic idea as well as an Aristotelian idea. And this is the classical idea.
Yeah, sure.
Now, again, on the part of God, God's ability to possess forms is actually simply his active power. Now, we can conceive of those two different notions. His active power would be the ability to actualize potencies. Now, one of the potencies that is being actualized is his ability to be able to possess forms. Now, I'm saying that on the part of God, God eternally is able to possess these things. However, the distinction between God's possession of forms and our possession of forms is in us, we are able to possess some sort of, temporal contingent form.
You only provided the definition between knowledge and power, but what he asked,
it was a distinction between both, And I'm explaining that the distinction is going to be on the part of the reasoning. Now, the reason why, and this is something I don't understand. Yeah, so Avicenna had a similar idea, but he wasn't necessarily.
So there is no distinction on the. Let's be clear. Let's be clear. There is no distinction on the Thomistic view on knowledge and power in an actual sense. There is none.
Oh my gosh. Okay, look.
There is none.
So
don't say, oh my gosh, that's the case. Do you understand that point? That's divine simplicity. That's why they can say the Father is the Son is the Holy Spirit.
Why do you keep manipulating us? Why don't you let us talk?
I don't want manipulating anyone, man.
Why don't you let us talk? Why don't you let Christians talk? Why do you let 20-year-old Christians talk?
That's why you believe in what you believe.
Why don't you let teenagers talk? Why don't you let teenagers talk?
I don't care if you're a teenager or not.
Okay, so why do you interrupt us then? Where's the respect?
I don't need to respect you.
Talk about this. So why were you complaining about me disrespecting if you don't need to respect?
The issue comes where you say
so anyway, are we done here?
Because
the thing is, there's no distinction. All right, beautiful. So that's how we understand it now. My brother, the reason why he believes that there's a distinction between the Father and the Holy Spirit is because they don't even believe in the power and knowledge distinction. God is divinely simple.
Different things.
Absolute existence.
That's not an issue.
But that's incommensurate with the Trinity.
That we have,
how can you say that God is divinely simple, but at the same time have a Trinity?
Exactly.
How can you have divine simplicity and the Trinity?
Because Aquinas,
it's ridiculous.
Because Aquinas
so they don't even want to distinguish between the power of God and the knowledge of God. But at the same time, you can have a distinction between the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit.
For Aquinas,
it doesn't work like that. And they know it doesn't work like that. They're trying to force two ideas together, which don't work together.
We're gonna cut you. That's why you're misinterrupting us.
Yeah, well, you know where it's going. That's why you started acting that.
Knowledge and power in Him is really distinct in God the only virtue.
So let me go back to the guys. Ladies and gentlemen, let me explain because a lot of it was philosophical mumbo jumbo.
So the idea of divine
they are completely impossible to speak to, but I'll speak to the people because...
So the reason that you don't want to speak to me...
No, I was speaking to you.
No,
you weren't answering my question.
No, you
weren't. Do you want to give one more chance?
What you were doing is you were repeating the question. So I'm going to ask you, do you believe God's existence is different from His essence? You said you don't know. The question that I want to ask you now is, does God have multiple attributes?
Yes.
Okay. And these things are going to be non-identical to
sorry, excuse me. Do you believe in that?
No, answer your question.
No, I answered. Hold on. What do you mean? He asked the question. I answered your question back. So you don't want to have a discussion?
Oh no, because you did the same. Because you did the same.
I answered yes.
No, you tried to have a.
You said you believe. You said
on the part of divine attributes.
Bro, sorry,
you don't want to talk. It's okay.
Oh, you're scared. Why are you scared?
I'm not scared.
On the part of the. Hold on. So the reason is because, right?
Please, brother.
If you have the attribute, for example, of knowledge.
And if I do piss you off, what's going to happen?
What's happening? There's two Davids and one Goliath. What's going to
happen if I piss you off? Is there going to be any consequence?
Yeah, I don't understand why.
No, so don't speak like that, brother.
So yeah, let's just calm down. When it comes,
you're going to do something about it.
The idea is this, right?
You're going to do something about it.
Are you threatening a teenager now?
Yeah.
You threatening a teenager?
Yeah, I'm teenager.
Okay, so what are you going to do?
Why are you threatening a teenager?
You were talking to me in a negative manner. You're saying if you don't do this again, so I just want to know what your consequences are. What are your consequences?
Knowledge is something...
Brother, please, you don't have any consequences.
Hold on. So this is fine.
You have to understand that.
Yeah, knowledge, right?
Because they're not... With all due respect, I've been very polite with these two.
I've been very polite.
Have I been polite with them or not?
No, you've not.
Okay, have I been reasonable? I've been polite. Right.
Okay. I don't think you have not been reasonable.
I have been reasonable. And the reason is
you've asked the question, has God got multiple attributes?
Yes.
And I said yes. And then I said, do you believe in that? Then you started talking over me.
No. What you did
what's the point of this
you did the same thing before. Now what you did before is you tried to say, are they the same, are they the same? And then I tried to explain
is God's knowledge the same as God's power?
Now again, when we come to the specific attributes...
Why can't you answer my question?
I reverse what I said before. Now when
yes or no?
I reverse what I said before.
So you don't want to answer the question?
Because in this dialogue, the question that needs to be asked is whether knowledge is something about Allah that isn't the whole of Allah. Is knowledge something about Allah that isn't the whole of Allah? Yes or no?
Is knowledge... When you say whole and part, what do you mean by that?
So a part is going to be, in basic mereology, something about a subject that is not the whole of a subject.
Yeah.
That is just going to be
but the reason why in basic mereology is there's 9 different definitions of a part.
There's 9 different usages of a part.
Yeah, sure. That's why it's important to understand. Because in basic mereology, there's 9 definitions. You can say this is a part of his personality, or you can say it's a part of a cake, and they mean 2 different things.
Now the part of a cake.
Hold on. Yeah, so when we were talking before, I asked you, is the knowledge...
Because we're talking about mereology now, right? Now the reason I interrupted him is because he wanted to move away from mereology. He wanted to move away from mereology to a previous question.
I'm speaking to you, my friend, and you're cutting me up. Do you want to speak for 2 minutes and me for 2 minutes? Is that fair?
If you are speaking on mereology specifically,
is that fair? Do you want to speak for 2 minutes and then me for 2 minutes? Is that fair?
If you only answer the specific things that have been brought to the discussion, sure.
Maybe he was going back to that.
So would you like to speak for 1 minute and then I speak for 1 minute? Would that be fair?
So that's fine. I can speak.
Because I can't speak to you right now. I feel like I can't discuss with you. You're an impossible person to speak with.
I feel like you can't discuss with me because there are certain
can I put
my drive down.
Should I put this watch on?
I can put a timer.
No, this 1 minute, one each. All right, you go first, and then I'll answer again. Okay, I'm going to go back and forth. No, it's fine. You can have your time. You've got a minute. Go, please.
Hold on. I'm going to just put a timer on the phone, right? And what I want to establish is a specific idea. So 1 minute, go, right? Now, you believe that God has multiple attributes. Now, the question I asked him was, pertaining to knowledge, is knowledge something about God that isn't the whole of what God is? Now, I then gave this reason because under mereology, every single definition of a part, whether proper or improper parts, are going to coalesce under the same notion of that of a subject that is not pertaining to the whole. Part of a cake is going to be something about a cake that isn't the whole of a cake. Part of a tree, same thing. Parts of time, something about the general constants of time that is not the whole of time. So, to answer this very specific question, is knowledge something about Allah that is not the whole of Allah? Now, if you cannot answer the question, please explain certain reasons why. And if you can answer the question, then we can move on with that form of dialogue. Because that is the thing about divine simplicity that is trying to be denied. Composition.
Okay, your time is up, yeah?
On the part of God. Now my time's up.
All right.
Okay, so you have 1 minute.
My view is, there's 3 views in Islam, okay? There's the view of the divine simplicity, which is the view of Averroes and the view of Ibn Sina. It's the same view as espoused by Thomas Aquinas, but it's not the same. The second view is the view of the Mu'tazilis, which is that the attributes of God are within the essence of God, which is why I said it's a very important distinction. Is that they all believe it's all within the same essence. So the attributes and essence distinction, they don't make one. It's all within the same essence. And the third view is the view of the Ash'aris and the Hanbalis, which is that the attributes of God are ontologically separate from the essence of God. That's the view that I personally take. The view of the Ash'aris and the Hanbalis, which is the view that God has multiple attributes, all of which are... The knowledge of God is different from the power of God. The power of God is different from the will of God, and so on and so forth. Yeah, separate. So, separate. So, my question is, do you believe that the knowledge of God is the same as the power of God, or are they different?
So I'm glad you actually brought that clarification, which was not necessarily a clarification because that was...
Sorry?
I'm glad you said that they were separate, because that would mean that God is going to be in a greater form of composition, right? The person of Allah, you would believe that Allah is going to be some sort of subject of reference, so a subject that you can refer to. I'll just pause my time, because that was... So you would believe that Allah is a subject of reference, and because of this, the subject is going to be both the essence and the attributes. The person of Allah is going to be for you both the essence as the attributes, because you believe that the essence is separate from the attributes, as you've said. Now, because that is the case, it is still going to be part of the subject, Allah, the individual that holds, that formally constitutes both the essence and the attributes. As you can see, there's going to be a problem of composition there. So, to answer your question fairly, as I have 5 seconds, if I run a bit over time, forgive me. On the part of God, I would, for the purpose of this conversation, I'm going to ascribe to a Western view. Yeah.
All right, sure. Yeah. So I've just explained, I've answered your question very clearly. I said that yes, I believed in the essence are different from the attributes of God. There's different separate. When I say the separate, I'm not talking about separability from a physical perspective that you can.
No, I would never.
Brother, I'm my time.
Sorry. I'll pause. I would never accept that. Yeah, go on. Yeah, I paused it when I was speaking. Because I don't want to,
That's the view of, as I say, the Hanbalis and the Ash'aris and the Maturidites. The view that God has essence and He has attributes, and that the attributes are ontologically different from the essence of God. So that is my view, and I believe that the power of God is different from the knowledge of God. So we can distinguish, when we say the knowledge of God, we're talking about His ability to know or to perceive information, His power is His ability to do things. So now what I'm saying is, just as I am able to distinguish between godly power and godly knowledge, on your view of divine simplicity, is God have real power which is distinguishable, discernible from God's knowledge or not? That's all it is.
So the question you asked is whether they are discernible or not. That's actually going to be on the part of the reasoning. Now again, the reason why they are going to be distinguishable is, as Aquinas explains, there are certain divine perfections as instituted into creatures that allow us to, by way of analogy, apply them to God. We can still say that God has power if by power we mean the ability to actualize potencies.
Sorry?
Power we mean the... Sorry, I just have to pause there. The ability to actualize potencies. I'll continue. So, because God has the ability to actualize potencies, we can ascribe that to God. And because God is able to possess forms, we can also ascribe that to God. However, the divine perfection of knowledge and power on the part of God are going to be the same thing as His existence, as Aquinas explains. Now, bear in mind, your question was on whether we can know these different things. Now, my question to you, as I have 10 seconds left, is going to be, again, whether these things are going to be something about the subject Allah that are not the whole of the subject Allah. Please answer that specific question if you can.
From one sense, yes. To answer your question, from one sense, yes. It's something about the subject Allah, which is not about the whole of Allah. In one sense, yes. The answer is yes. Because when we talk about the power of God, in one sense we're talking about something about Allah which is not an exhaustive list of all the things about Allah. Because when we talk about the knowledge, so the answer is completely yes. Now the second thing I'm saying to you now is, we have a very clear idea. God has power, God has knowledge, God has will. Is it not the case that on your divine simplicity view of Thomas Aquinas, that in fact there is no difference, there's no real ontological difference between power and knowledge? That's why you can say, well, actually the Father is the Son from one perspective, or the will of the Father is the will of the Son from one perspective, because all you're doing is you're playing games with divine simplicity, but you're trying to have your cake and eat it both. Because in reality you said that God is, his power is his ability to actualize potencies. How can that be the case without compositional attribution? Go ahead.
Jesus is God, not a Muslim.
Appreciate it.
Jesus is God, not a Muslim. Muhammad is not the prophet.
Because you answered yes to that question, that would mean that you accept that God would have metaphysical parts. Now, because you accept that God has metaphysical parts, you accept metaphysical composition in God. So you're a compositionist by that view. Now, the second idea is that due to being a compositionist, your God would be metaphysically finite, because all things that are metaphysically composite would be metaphysically finite. Now, to answer the question of Aquinas and power and knowledge, as I've explained before, the distinction between real relations can still exist under Aquinas' Thomistic view. So Aquinas doesn't believe that there can't be any distinctions between the persons. He believes that the persons are really distinct. And the reason he believes they're really distinct is because in relation to the essence, the Father and the Son are going to be identical. But in relation to each other, which is what a real relation is, they can still be distinct. So that's not an issue. So just to answer the question quickly before my time runs out.
Your time is already up.
Yeah, no, I just have to.
But I'll give you some more time.
Yeah, thank you. So
exactly said what you said.
No, not exactly. So just to explain what you asked. Would you accept, therefore, that your God is metaphysically finite because your God is metaphysically composite?
All right, so the kind of composition that we think would lead to that kind of conclusion is the kind of composition which means that if you remove a thing or increase a thing or put something into it, that it either goes larger if it's increased or it gets smaller when it's reduced. And that is something, for example, that if I were to, it's something which would be susceptible to decomposition, or would be susceptible to disassembly, or susceptible to what you call the principle of separability. So if something can be actually separated, we don't believe that God's knowledge can be separated from his power in an actual ontological sense. It will be that sense which would cause the conclusion that you're talking about. So we don't believe that God is temporal in the sense that you're talking about. I've answered all your questions. Now it's your turn to answer the question, which is, if you don't believe a God that's knowing and that's powerful in that real sense, then what kind of God do you really believe in? You're closer to being an atheist than you are to being a Christian, because you believe in a God with effectively no attributes. Right, he's not powerful. Is that true or not?
So this is very important, because you try to argue the kind of composition that would go to that is if it can be taken away or added to. However, inseparability.
5 minutes.
Yeah. So inseparability does not disregard parthood. For example, the distinction between a body and a soul in heaven. Bodies and souls are inseparable in heaven, yet they are still going to be part of the subject of a human being. You can still be composite as a thing, even if they are inseparable. So your argument there has been essentially disregarded. Because the idea is that just because you have something that's inseparable doesn't mean that they're no longer parts. You can still have parts even if they're inseparable. Body and soul composition still exists in heaven, and you cannot separate the body and the soul in heaven, as I've explained. Now, on the part of a person asking here about atheism, the idea is that Aquinas addresses real relations in God. It's the answer to the question. Aquinas posits that the persons are to be defined as real relations in God, and thus simplicity is still affirmed. So you can still have real distinctions amongst the persons, and yet you still have the distinctions in
Time's up.
the essence.
Look, here's the difference between me and him. I've been very honest about my theology. He's trying to cover it up, because the truth about his theology is this. His theology, divine simplicity, go and Google it and research it in your own self. They do not believe in actual ontological distinctions between the attributes of God, which means they believe in a God that doesn't have power, that doesn't have knowledge, that doesn't have will. They don't have real will. And I find it surprising that he was talking to me about the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit having the same will, when isn't will something that can be susceptible to composition? Is it something that he mentioned power? He said something, oh, it's the potential to actualize. Isn't that something that could be, on his idea, divine simplicity, that is susceptible to composition on his idea? So he realizes that if he goes down that route, he becomes really an atheist for all intents and purposes, or a deist. He's a deist. Because really he doesn't believe in a God with attributes. Or a classical theist. That's what he becomes. And so how can a classical theist believe in Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit? 3 different things. I mean, isn't this the most flagrant composition in the world? You got 3 in 1 and 1 in 3, and you're saying you don't believe in composition. Yeah. You're talking to us about will and power? It's ridiculous, isn't it?
Right, time's over. So what you were just doing is essentially complaining about the view that I actually espoused. However, that wasn't the view that I espoused at all. In relation to power and will, in terms of their formal definition, they can be applied to God, but as Aquinas says, they would have a relation to God eminently and simply. So on the part of God, God would simply be pure existence itself. That has no issue as to whether we could say, could God, qua being, do these things or have these certain divine perfections. That has nothing to do with composition there, because we're not affirming such as distinct on the part of God. However, on your part, you were clear about your compositionism, and your argument that God was not finite did not substantiate enough to conclude such. When you argue that God has parts metaphysically, that would mean that your God is metaphysically finite because of his composition of such. So could you answer why you believe that your God is metaphysically finite? There you go.
He lied by saying that I believe that God has parts. I mean, either he's not been listening or he's lying. Either are things we've observed from this behavior of this individual before. The point I'm saying to you is this. How can you be complaining, to use your term, about composition and you believe in the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit? How can you be talking to us about divine simplicity and you've complicated, right, in numeric form, the numbers of the persons of God? The only way out of this is to say, this is not an ontological distinction, this is just a numeric distinction, but all 3 are really one in every sense, in which case, you're not you don't believe in the Trinity. Sorry to say, there is no Trinity. You might as well just say what we say, is that there's only one God. But if you believe in divine simplicity, and once again, please research it. Divine simplicity, they do not believe in a distinction between actual power, actual knowledge, actual will. The moment you start saying God can do, God can do this, God can do that, how can it be the case when God is not meant to have any other thing ontologically separate or different or distinguished from the essence? Go ahead.
Okay, so my timer cut out, right? I didn't set the timer before. So you're going to have to...
Where are you guys going?
Going to the event.
So, just to clarify, okay? Right? This is very verbose, and I can do a similar thing. You'll see how I do. Now, everyone that is watching this video, please go and research divine simplicity and the various articulations of divine simplicity. As this man has admitted, he admitted that in a very strong sense, he said, yes, in a sense, they are going to be something about the subject Allah that is not the whole of the subject Allah. By this notion then and this definition, it would be, it would be that the subject Allah is going to be composite. Now, he tries to attack the notion of the Trinity and say that I should be a classical theist. Well, as he should know, most Christian missiologists, most Christians in the patristic tradition were classical theists. They were, as Augustine explains, as the Cappadocians were as well. Now, on your part, since you believe that these attributes in pertaining to the subject Allah are that which is not the whole, you therefore believe fragrantly that there is some sort of metaphysical composition. To answer the question.
Time's up.
Maybe.
So here we have it again.
Now my time was up actually. So.
Okay.
Yeah, go on.
Okay, so he's reiterating the point. He believes that a being with multiple attributes is compositional in the same way that I have Jenga and I disassemble it. That it alludes to the contingency of something in that same way. I'm saying prove that. If that's your claim, please prove that. I want to see the proof for that. Number 2, if my postulation is as follows. I'm saying that classical theism is incompatible with the Trinity. It's incompatible with the idea of a loving God. Yes. God doesn't love. Don't say God loves. As a Christian, you pride yourself on the fact that God loves. On divine simplicity, God doesn't love, because love doesn't exist in God. Love is not even there. This guy who was talking to me before talked about how God has relationship with love. Could you admit now, your God is not a loving God in any real sense. Your God is not a merciful God in any real sense. Your God is not a willing God in any real sense. Your God is not a powerful God in any real sense. Your God is not even a God in any real sense.
When it comes to this idea now, we will answer these questions, and that's completely fine. So, when it comes to the attributes as applied to God, given their formal definition, they will simply, as I've said again, relate to God in an eminent way. If love, and you must provide a definition, if love means to will the good for someone else, then God simply needs to will the divine essence for all things that pertain to existence, and thus he has classified as really loving in a real sense. Again, your terms and notions are vague, and the reason that they are vague is because you're...
That's fine, continue.
And the reason that they are vague is because on the divine simplest and the classical theist, they've already said that these formal constitutive definitions can be applied to God in exactly their relation to creatures. God can still be really loving and really merciful as is simply the justice of God as applied to creatures. Gregory the theologian says the exact same thing. By analogy, right? So in a real sense, God can be loving.
I'll give you 5 more seconds.
Be merciful, and so on and so on.
Okay, he said that God's love is his willing to do good for something or another essence or another being.
That's
another
not what I said.
He's willing to be good. He said something like that, right?
Say now, something like that?
Yes. Now, the point is if God's attribute of love is contingent on his attribute of willing, no problem. That's the view of the Ash'aris. That's no problem. But the issue is this: you've now affirmed what? The will of God. Is that not composite? Hey, look at this. Can you imagine this guy? He's talking about the will of God, will this and that. How can God have will, which is separate from his existence and his absolute existence, and that not be composition? So you want to have your cake and eat it both. Exactly. So it's composition when we're talking about the power and the knowledge. But when he starts talking about the will, it's not composition. It's definitely composition the same way. Why not? How would you define God's will if it's not something which is attributed as an ontological status of God? Yeah. It's something which is separate to this, as a subject to the total of God. Is the will of God? Is it separate to the total subject or not, as his definition? Of course you can't. The thing is, if you believe in the divine simplicity, you believe in a God with 0 attributes,
right,
zero actual attributes. So, is that not the case?
Only affirms God's essence, but not attributes.
Now, let me explain very explicitly, right? So, like I was saying before, okay, and as I've been saying this entire time, you tried to give an erroneous notion of will, and you said that actually love is going to be contingent on the will. Now again, according to the scholastic tradition, will is just going to be the natural appetite towards the final cause. That is literally just going to be God qua being. Now all we're doing is saying, in applying these formal definitions to God, this would be the case. What we're not saying is that God is a conglomerate of ontological items that exist in him, which is what you have said. You said that these things have their own ontologies and that they are on the part of the subject of Allah, multiple entitative things. Now again, ontologies and entities are going to be treated as the same. I'm not ascribing mind or being to any of them. No, I am ascribing being to them because these things exist. You believe in a conglomerate of existent entities. That is the issue.
Time's up.
That is polytheistic.
Time's up.
Or composition is.
All right, sure.
Go on.
Okay. He said that when he's talking about will, the definition of will is appetites towards final causes. That's what he said. Appetites towards final causes, which is akin to kind of emanationism. It's like, for example, God doesn't actually have a choice in the matter. It's like the sun and the rays of the sun. It just happens, which means that when you say that God loves you, he's not choosing to love you, he just happens to love you, just as that sun happens to express its rays on me right now. God is like your sun. That sun over there is your God, effectively. He has no will, he has no choice, he has no power, he has no knowledge. That's your God. And I believe you, believe me, this man here, he doesn't believe in that. The Christians don't believe in that nonsense, because the Christians believe in a loving God. So you could try and push this onto the Christian belief. It's not even the Christian belief. They're trying to have their cake and eat it both. If you want to believe in divine simplicity, you can't have divine simplicity, Trinity, and multiple attributes, a loving God, a willing God, all at the same time. You can't have it all. You can just say that I believe in a God akin to the sun, expressing his will like the will like the sun expresses its rays.
Alright, cool. So, I have a minute as well, right? So,
Let's go. Brother, we have to go.
Now, I just want to make one final remark.
I have to go, brother. Yeah?
After discrediting him, you want to go?
One remark. Now, again, this is one remark.
I have to go, brother.
Your God is going to be similar like the sun.
Anyway, we're done now, brother.
It's okay. Your God is similar like the sun. That's it. So as you can see, he used a sneaker as an example.